So in this video, I'm just going to briefly talk about ideas concerning the afterlife. Now, the afterlife itself, or rather the ideas of the afterlife, have always intrigued me. I've always really been interested in ideas about what could happen in the future, after we die and things like that. And my ideas on this have changed quite a lot over the years. But now I believe that at the very deepest level of our human psyche, we have a kind of Freudian fear of death. And if anyone doesn't know, that's what Freud talks about. Freud mentions that, or Freud believed that every single one of our fears that we have in life stems from the main fear, which is the fear of death. And I believe that the fact is that we as human beings, we are the only creatures which are aware of our own mortality. No other animal on this planet knows that it's going to die, and this puts us in a very unique position, because obviously it's terrifying to know that our existence is going to come to an end, and our sort of biological instinct is to continue surviving. We will do whatever it takes to try and continue surviving. And so I think this is where originally, probably tens of thousands of years ago, ideas concerning the afterlife started to kind of emerge, because it was a way of kind of counteracting this awareness of our own mortality. And so, in a way, most religions, which have adapted over time, all religions believe in the idea of an afterlife. They believe that we are somehow immortal, or that we could be immortal if we behave in a certain way. In the Judeo-Christian religions, if we're good, we'll go to heaven for eternity. And in Buddhism and Hinduism, they believe in karma and rebirth and reincarnation. So it seems pretty much all religions believe in a kind of immortality. And essentially, I believe this has evolved in mankind to balance out or counteract this sort of knowledge that we are going to die, or this awareness of our own mortality, the awareness that our existence will one day come to an end. And it is a terrifying thought, and I think that somehow along the lines evolution has sort of made us develop, or has allowed us to develop these kind of immortal religious views, to kind of balance out this problem of our own awareness of our own mortality. And so I wanted to talk mainly about the origins of hell. So now I've got that out of the way. Originally, I can't speak for every single religion, but certainly the ancient Greeks, they did believe in an afterlife, but they didn't believe in hell. They believed in Hades. This whole idea with the ferryman. You had to sort of metaphorically pay the ferryman when you died, and you get taken to Hades. And in Greek myth, when you died, every single person who dies goes to Hades. And in Hades itself, there's 3 sections, and if you've been a naughty boy, or if you've been a bad person, then you will be punished in Hades for a short time. But the most important thing here is that you won't be punished for eternity. You will just kind of be, given a slap on the wrist and told, don't do that again. You've been naughty, and then you'll spend the rest of your days in the afterlife. And Roman ideas were pretty much identical. They the Romans believed in the afterlife, but they didn't believe in any punishment whatsoever in the next life. So they certainly didn't believe in any kind of hell or anything like that. They didn't even believe that you got punished temporarily in your next life. They believe that in the next life, that's it. It's just another life, and you're certainly not condemned for eternity in suffering or being tortured or whatever by demons or nothing like that. And even the Hebrews, or during the times of the Hebrews, the Jews, during the times of the Jews. I mean, the Old Testament or the Talmud, which is the Jewish Bible, they don't mention anything about hell or anything like that. The Old Testament doesn't mention that if you're bad, you're going to be tortured for the rest of your days in hell. Hell basically did not exist in any of these ancient Greek, Roman, or Jewish, doctrines of faith. It just didn't exist. The only time hell is mentioned is in the New Testament by Jesus. Jesus is pretty much one of the first people to actually bring this idea of hell. The idea that you will be punished for eternity for your finite crimes on this planet. And I mean, I just find this incredibly interesting because the idea of hell has been such a terrible idea. It's probably been one of the worst inventions and one of the most corrupt inventions of mankind ever, because so many people have used this idea of hell, including priests and the church, in order to control people. They'll just say to people, if you don't do as we tell you, then you're going to go to hell. I mean, it's the perfect way of controlling people. Keep people scared of being tortured to death by the devil for eternity, and they're going to do whatever you want them to do. They're going to give you money. They're going to submit to your authority or anything. And so yeah, basically this idea of hell is just a perfect way of controlling people, and I can't think of anything that could be more successful. If you can convince people that hell exists, by keeping illiterate people who have no knowledge of the Bible or God or anything like that. If you can convince them that hell exists, then you could get them to do anything. You tell them to jump, and they'll say how high. And so it's a terrible doctrine, and I'm sure most people watching my videos are probably aware of this. But there's been so many times over the course of our history where the idea of hell has been used to just cause so much suffering in the world, and we have to remember now that Christianity has been around in its present form for what, nearly 2,000 years, which is like 60 generations of humanity. And so the church has had 60 generations of humans to indoctrinate with this corrupt idea, this controlling idea that hell exists and that you will be punished for eternity for your finite crimes. And so yeah, it's basically, after 2,000 years, it's caused irreparable damage to the human psyche. I mean, even where I'm from in England, it's not a particularly we're not a particularly religious country. We're a very secular country. Yet, the whole kind of idea of hell still lingers. I'm not a religious person, and I was not brought up to be religious. I mean, my parents weren't. I mean, my parents were christened sort of Church of England and Roman Catholic, but they never went to church or prayed or anything like that. It was, on paper they were religious. So I feel I was lucky in that sense, that I was never brought up to believe, that hell exists. But even I still have this idea in the back of my mind um, of hell, and that if I'm bad, then there's a chance that I may go to hell. I still think about that in the back of my head, even though I'm not religious. So, I have no idea how people who have actually been brought up in a religious environment would feel about this. It must, as I said, it's affected. It must have affected our human psyche so much more than we could possibly begin to realise. And so I dread to think, the damage that it's caused to people. And if I'm, me being a secular atheist, if it dwells in my mind, then I dread to think how much it dwells in other people's mind. And even though we may not be overtly controlled nowadays by the church, there's still those moral rules that we perhaps subliminally follow because we are afraid of going to hell in some ways. And so, yeah, the point of this video is basically just to say that the whole idea of hell has been used as a control mechanism. It's been used to control people. It's such a corrupt and terrible idea, and for so many years it's been used to just control people and get people to submit their authority to other people. And it's this all stems from the New Testament, from the doctrines of Christianity and the Catholic Church, which has been the main culprit in the spread of this plague, which has affected humanity. And in some ways, I can never forgive the church for it, because it's something now that has been so ingrained into our culture and so ingrained into our our psyches that we just can't escape from it. This idea of hell is always going to be there in our minds. And I mean, maybe one day it will disappear and we'll stop thinking about the afterlife being a place of torture and eternal damnation and whatever. But yeah, but yeah, it's a really bad idea. And if anyone's got anything to say about it or whatever, then let me know. And oh yeah, I've recently started a blog where I've been writing quite a bit recently about the sort of stuff that I make YouTube videos about. So if anyone's interested in reading my blog, I will put up a link in the whatjigmajig in the thingy below. So yeah, cheers.